Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you the new science fiction stories for you, and new adventure, new world.
They called us vermin, pest species, the galaxy's cosmic joke, too stubborn to die, too stupid to know we should. For 300 cycles, humanity lived in the margins of galactic society, hauling trash nobody else wanted to touch, fixing stations in radiation belts that fried better species, eating protein paste while the ascended collective feasted on worlds. We were the roaches of space, the cleanup crew, the things you step around and try not to think about. Then the renders came, and the galaxy learned what roaches do when you corner them. The station smelled like burnt coolant and recycled air that had been recycled too many times. Cale Reeves pressed his forehead against the observation port, watching the Varanthi cruiser dock with all the grace of a swan made of light. Beautiful, efficient, everything humanity wasn't. He hated it. Staring won't make them respect you, Jin said from behind him. She was elbow deep in a maintenance panel, routing power around a blown coupling, because of course the Varanthi refused to share their repair technology with contractor species. Just makes you look desperate. Cale didn't turn around. The cruiser's hull was seamless, shifting colors like oil on water. No rivets, no welds, no scars. Meanwhile, the human quarter of Apex Station, officially Sector 7, unofficially the Rust Belt, was held together with improvised patches and the engineering equivalent of prayers. They docked on the civilian platform, he said. Yeah, they never used the civilian platform. Jin paused. Her hands, stained with hydraulic fluid and older scars, went still. Huh. The Varanthi were Tier 2 in the collective's hierarchy. Not the ruling species. That honor belonged to the Kaith, silicon-based beings who thought in mathematical poetry and rarely bothered acknowledging carbon-based life existed. But close enough. The Varanthi ran the administration. The logistics. The pretty face the galaxy showed itself when it wanted to pretend it was enlightened and fair. Humans were Tier 9. There were only 10 tiers. You think they're here about the contract renewal? Jin asked. She'd gone back to work, but her movements were tighter now. Controlled. They're 3 months early. Maybe they're eager. The Varanthi are never eager. They're efficient. Jin made a noise that might have been agreement. Cale finally pulled himself away from the port and grabbed his data pad from the workbench. The screen was cracked, had been for 6 months, but it worked. That was the human motto, really. It works. His shift supervisor message was blinking. Report to administration deck. Immediately. Sweet baby Jesus, he muttered. Jin looked up. What? I'm being summoned. She went pale under the fluorescent work lights. In the 3 years they'd worked this station together, administration had never summoned anyone unless they were being terminated. Or arrested. Or in one memorable case, both. Want me to come? No. Cale was already moving toward the door. Someone needs to finish that coupling before the oxygen recyclers decide to take a day off. Cale, I'll be fine. He wasn't sure that was true. The administration deck existed in a different universe than Sector 7. The floors were actual polished stone, imported from somewhere with a name Cale couldn't pronounce. And the air smelled like nothing at all, which meant the filtration systems were top grade. Varanthi moved through the corridors like dancers, their 3-fingered hands gesturing in patterns that probably meant something in their gestural language. None of them looked at Cale. He'd worn his cleanest jumpsuit, which still had a stain on the shoulder from when a coolant line had decided to express its feelings last week. His boots squeaked on the perfect floor. A Varanthi in administrative purple flowed past him, and Cale caught the edge of their nostril slits flaring. Disgust. Or maybe just the smell of Sector 7 clinging to him. The conference room was smaller than he'd expected. One wall was transparent, showing the station's main docking array where ships came and went like schools of metal fish. 3 Varanthi sat at the curved table, their robes color-coded by rank in ways Cale had never bothered to learn. The one in the center spoke first. Their voice came through the translator bead in Cale's ear as smooth and emotionless as ice. Human contractor Cale Reeves. Identification confirmed. Be seated. There was one chair, human-sized, that was almost thoughtful, except the chair was positioned lower than the Varanthi seats, forcing Kale to look up at them. He sat. We are Administrator Velth, Coordinator Shin, and Assessor Crane, the Center Varanthi said. Their face was angular in ways human faces weren't, with eyes that saw into the ultraviolet spectrum. You have served this station for 42 months in waste reclamation and environmental maintenance. Yes, Administrator. Your species holds 17% of the station's contracted labor positions. I don't track the statistics, Administrator. No. Veltha's head tilted slightly. Your species rarely tracks anything beyond immediate survival parameters. The Varanthi to the left, Coordinator Shin, made a gesture that Kale's translator interpreted as amusement, or possibly pity. The database wasn't great with context. We have a proposition, Velth continued. A task unsuitable for Tier 2 biology, but within acceptable risk parameters for Tier 9 species. Kale's jaw tightened. Acceptable risk parameters was collective speak for we need someone expendable. What kind of task? Salvage and intelligence gathering. Veltha's fingers moved, and a holographic display bloomed above the table. It showed a ship, or what was left of one. The hull was torn open like something had chewed through it, and the debris field around it glittered with frozen atmosphere and worse things. This is the survey vessel Harmonious Inquiry, Velth said. It was investigating spatial anomalies in the Kethrin Expanse when it encountered an unknown force. All crew are presumed lost. The ship's data core may contain critical information about the anomaly. And you want me to go get it? Your species has demonstrated remarkable tolerance for environmental hazards. The Expanse contains elevated radiation, spatial distortions, and debris moving at velocities that would shred standard salvage drones. But not humans. Your biology is surprisingly resilient to conditions that would kill more sophisticated species. There it was. The thing they never said out loud, but everyone knew. Humans were tough the way cockroaches were tough. Not because they were better, but because they were too simple to know when they should die. What's the compensation? Kale asked. Veltha's nostril slits flared again. Direct. How characteristic. A pause. Successful retrieval of the data core will result in contract renewal for all human labor positions on this station for an additional 5 cycles. Failure will result in immediate termination of current contracts. The floor dropped out of Kale's stomach. You're holding 17% of the station's workforce hostage. We are offering an opportunity. That's one word for it. Coordinator Shin leaned forward. Your species thrives on adversity. Yes? This is simply adversity with clearly defined parameters. Kale looked at the hologram. The Harmonious Inquiry spun slowly in its debris field, a corpse ship full of secrets the collective wanted badly enough to risk a human's life for. How long do I have to decide? You have already decided, Velth said. Your species always chooses survival. It is your most predictable characteristic. Jin threw a wrench at his head. Kale ducked. The wrench clanged off the bulkhead behind him and landed in a parts bin with a catastrophic crash. Are you out of your goddamn mind? She shouted. Probably. The Kethrin Expanse? That's where ships go to become debris fields. I am aware. And you said yes. I said I'd think about it. Jin grabbed another wrench. Kale held up his hands. They're threatening to terminate every human contract on the station, he said. That's 1,200 people. Families. Kids. Where do they go if they lose their housing vouchers? The wrench stayed raised. Jin's hand was shaking. You go into the Expanse, you don't come back, she said quietly. Maybe. Definitely. Kale moved closer, slowly, like approaching a spooked animal. He'd known Jin since training. She'd been the one to pull him out of the airlock when his suit had failed during their first EVA drill. She'd been the one to talk him down when his daughter's medical bills had almost made him do something stupid with station property. She was the best engineer in Sector 7, and everyone knew it. I need you to prep a shuttle, he said. No. Jin, I said no. He reached out, caught her shoulder. She didn't pull away, but she didn't lower the wrench either. If I don't come back, he said, make sure everyone knows why. Make sure they know it wasn't an accident. Make sure they know the collective doesn't give a damn about any of us. That'll get me fired. Yeah. She finally lowered the wrench. Her eyes were wet. You're an idiot, she said. I know. And you're going anyway. Yeah. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of hydraulic fluid across her cheek. Okay. If you're doing this, we do it right. I'm prepping the shuttle, and I'm loading it with every piece of emergency gear I can steal from the good storage. The Varanthi will notice. Let them. Jian's jaw said in the way that meant she'd made a decision, and God himself couldn't change it. Besides, humans are supposed to be thieves and scavengers, right? Let's live up to expectations. The shuttle was a piece of junk held together by spite and outdated firmware. The collective had decommissioned it 6 years ago, but Sector 7 had quietly adopted it for short-range maintenance runs. The transponder was glitchy, the life support rattled like it had tuberculosis, and the attitude thrusters fired asymmetrically. It was perfect. Kale ran through the pre-flight checklist, while Jian loaded emergency supplies into the cargo bay. Extra oxygen canisters, radiation patches, a medkit that looked like it had served in 3 different wars. She'd even found an old EVA suit with manual seals, the kind the collective had phased out because they were too labor-intensive. The automated suits fail in high radiation zones, she'd explained. The electronics fry. This one's dumb as rocks, but it'll keep you alive. You've been planning this. I've been planning for the day the collective finally tries to get one of us killed. Yeah. She sealed the cargo bay and came back to the cockpit. The cramped space smelled like machine oil and recycled fear. Through the viewport, Apex Station rotated slowly, its human sector a rusted barnacle on an otherwise gleaming structure. Radio check every 4 hours, Jin said. If I don't hear from you, I'm coming after you. In what? I'll steal something. Despite everything, Kale smiled. You're a terrible liar. Yeah, well. She squeezed his shoulder. You're a terrible pilot. Guess we're even. She left before he could respond. The airlock cycled, and then he was alone with the shuttle's ambient hum and his own breathing. The station's traffic control cleared him for departure with the enthusiasm of someone filing garbage disposal paperwork. Kale fired the main engines, felt the shuttle shudder like it was having second thoughts, and pushed away from Apex Station into the black. The Kethrin Expanse was 6 days away at maximum burn. He had a lot of time to think about what he was flying toward. The Expanse announced itself 3 days out. Kale's radiation monitor started clicking like an angry insect, and the NAV computer began throwing error codes as spatial distortions played hell with the sensors. The stars outside the viewport looked wrong, stretched in some places, compressed in others, as if space itself was being pulled through a dimensional wringer. He cut the main engines and drifted. Out here, momentum was free. Fuel wasn't. The harmonious inquiry appeared on his scopes as a sun of metallic signatures spread across 500,000 cubic kilometers. The main hull was still intact, but barely. Something had hit it hard enough to peel back the armor, plating like foil. Kale had seen combat damage before, pirate raids on cargo haulers, the aftermath of the Orion incident, but this was different. The tears in the hull weren't blast patterns. They were ragged. Organic almost. Like teeth marks. His radio crackled. Apex Station to shuttle designation 779er. Report status. Kale keyed the mic. 779er. I'm on approach to the harmonious inquiry. Radiation levels are elevated, but within tolerance. Visual confirms catastrophic hull breach. Acknowledged. Proceed with data core retrieval. The voice was Varanthi. Probably Velth, though the translator stripped away most identifying features. Understood. Beginning approach. He killed the transmission and focused on flying. The debris field was a 3-dimensional minefield of shattered hull plates, frozen atmosphere, and things that might have been crew once. Kale threaded the shuttle between chunks of wreckage, using microbursts from the attitude thrusters to adjust his vector. The main hull loomed ahead, a cathedral of torn metal and darkness. Finding a docking port took 20 minutes. Most were sheared off or decompressed. He finally found one on the ship's port side that looked mostly intact, though the exterior cameras showed scoring around the airlock that made his skin crawl. The docking collar engaged with a clang that echoed through the shuttle's frame. Okay, Cale muttered to himself. Let's get this over with. He suited up in a manual EVA rig GN had packed. The thing was heavy, all reinforced plating and redundant seals, but it felt solid in ways the modern suits didn't. He checked his oxygen, 8 hours plus reserves, and maglocked a equipment belt around his waist. Cutting torch, emergency beacon, a pistol that probably wouldn't do much against whatever had torn through a collective survey ship, but made him feel better anyway. The airlock cycled. The Harmonious Inquiry's interior was a tomb. Emergency lighting flickered in arterial red, casting shadows that moved wrong. The walls were Varanthi design, smooth, curved, efficient, but they were scored with the same ragged marks he'd seen on the exterior. His helmet lamp cut through the darkness, illuminating corridors that bent at angles his brain didn't want to process. Spatial distortions. Had to be. He pulled up the ship's layout on his wrist display. The data core would be in the central processing node, 3 decks down and aft. The layout showed a direct route through the main corridor, but Cale had learned a long time ago that direct routes in damaged ships were usually death traps. He found a maintenance shaft and started climbing down. The silence was oppressive. His breathing echoed in his helmet, and every movement sent vibrations through the dead ship's frame. Twice he passed what had been crew quarters. The Varanthi inside were frozen in the vacuum, their elegant faces locked in expressions that transcended species. Terror was universal. The maintenance shaft opened onto a corridor 3 decks down. The spatial distortions were worse here. The walls seemed to curve away from his perspective, and his inner ear kept insisting he was falling even though his mag boots held firm. The central processing node was a sphere of crystalline matrices suspended in a null-G chamber. Even dead, it was beautiful, quintessentially Varanthi, all efficiency and aesthetic grace. The data core itself was a cylinder about the size of his forearm, slotted into a port at the sphere's center. Cale pulled himself across the chamber, using handholds that seemed to shift position when he wasn't looking directly at them. His gloved hand closed around the data core. It came free with a click. That's when the ship groaned. Not the settling of metal. Not the stress of a damaged frame. Something else. Cale's helmet picked up vibrations through the structure, rhythmic, almost like breathing. His radiation monitor screamed. The spatial distortions rippled, and for a moment he saw the corridor outside, the processing node fold in on itself like origami made of reality. Then he saw the eyes. They weren't eyes, not really. Couldn't be, but his brain translated them as eyes because it had no other reference for organs of perception that existed across dimensional boundaries. They were vast, ancient, and they were looking at him. Not at the ship, at him specifically, at the human. His radio exploded with static, and underneath it, something that might have been a voice or might have been his sanity fragmenting. Vermin, it said, in a language that bypassed his translator and carved itself directly into his neurons. Small thing. Prey species. Why do you persist? Cale's fingers went numb. The data core tumbled from his grip, floating in the null G. He grabbed for it, missed, grabbed again. The eyes moved closer. The ship's walls began to dissolve. Not physically, conceptually. Cale could see through them now, into the spaces between spaces where things that had never been matter moved with purpose that predated stars. The renders. That's what they were called in the fragmentary reports. The things that came from outside normal space and unmade everything they touched. The galaxy's oldest nightmare, and here he was looking at it with human eyes that were never meant to process this kind of existence. You are not prey, the voice said, and now it sounded curious. You are not predator. Were you? Cale's hand finally closed around the data core. He shoved it into his equipment belt and activated his magnetic boots at full power. The deck plating beneath him was half dissolved, but there was enough left to anchor to. "I'm the guy," he gasped. "Who fixes the toilets when they break?" The eyes blinked, or something blinked. Reality folded sideways. "Irrelevant," the voice said. "You will be unmade." Kale ran. He didn't remember the route back. Didn't remember navigating the dissolving corridors, or the maintenance shaft that tried to seal itself around him, or the airlock that was half there and half somewhere else. His body moved on autopilot, driven by the lizard brain imperative that predated consciousness. Run. Survive. Don't think. The shuttle's airlock was a miracle of solid matter in a ship that was becoming a suggestion of itself. Kale threw himself through it, slammed the manual override, and felt the collar detach with a clang that was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. He fell into the pilot seat and punched the engines without running pre-flight. The shuttle screamed in protest, but it moved, thrusters firing asymmetrically, pulling him away from the harmonious inquiry as the survey ship folded in on itself like a dying star. The eyes watched him go. They didn't follow. Not yet. The shuttle rattled like a tin can full of angry bolts. Kale's hands wouldn't stop shaking on the controls, and every time he blinked he saw those eyes, vast and wrong and curious in ways that made his stomach fold. The data core sat on the co-pilot's seat, perfectly ordinary. Just a cylinder of crystalline matrices and quantum storage. Nothing to indicate it had been pulled from a ship currently being unmade by forces that shouldn't exist. His radiation monitor had stopped screaming. The readings were still elevated, but dropping as he put distance between himself and the expanse. The NAV computer had rebooted 3 times before it finally accepted that the stars were where they were supposed to be. Kale keyed the radio with fingers that felt like they belonged to someone else. 779er to Apex Station. I have the package. Returning to base. Static hissed for 3 seconds. 4. 5. Then acknowledged 779er. What is your condition? It was Veltha's voice. Smooth. Emotionless. Like Kale hadn't just stared into the face of something that treated reality like a suggestion. Functional, Kale said, because his tongue was too thick to manage anything more complex. Report any anomalies encountered during retrieval. Kale looked at the data core, looked at his hands, still shaking, looked at the viewport where space was blessedly normal and empty. Negative anomalies, he lied. Hull breach was extensive. Retrieve the core from central processing. No complications. Another pause. Longer this time. Understood. Maintain current course. Apex Station out. The transmission ended. Kale sat in the pilot's seat and let his head fall back against the headrest. His heart was trying to jackhammer its way out of his chest. The suit's medical sensors were probably having a field day with his vitals. He should sleep. 6 days back to Apex, and he'd been awake for he'd lost track. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw them. The eyes that looked at him like he was a puzzle. An anomaly. You're not prey. You're not predator. Were you? Tired. Kale muttered to the empty cockpit. I'm really goddamn tired. The shuttle flew on, carrying him and the data core back toward the galaxy that thought it understood what it was dealing with. Jian was waiting at the dock when he arrived. She didn't say anything, just looked at him through the viewport with eyes that cataloged every detail. The way he moved too carefully, like his bones weren't quite connected right. The tremor in his hands when he killed the engines. The fact that he sat in the pilot's seat for a full minute after docking before he could make himself stand up. The airlock cycled. She was there when it opened. You look like hell, she said. Feel worse. Did you get it? Kale held up the data core. Jin's expression did something complicated. Relief and worry fighting for dominance. The Varanthi are waiting in Conference 7, she said. They want the core immediately. Of course they do. Kale. She caught his arm as he moved past her. What happened out there? He opened his mouth. Closed it. The words existed, but they were in the wrong order, describing things his vocabulary wasn't built for. I saw something, he finally said, in the expanse. Something that. He trailed off. How did you explain eyes that look through dimensions? A voice that carved itself into your neurons? Something that what? Something that noticed me. Jin went very still. Noticed you specifically? Yeah. That doesn't make sense. You're one human. Why would I don't know? Kale pulled away gently. But I need to give him this core, and then I need to sleep for about 3 weeks. The Varanthi won't. I don't care what the Varanthi will or won't do. I did their impossible job. They can deal with me being human about it. He walked toward Conference 7 before she could argue. His boots squeaked on the polished floor, and every Varanthi he passed gave him the wide berth you'd give a waste disposal unit that might be leaking. The conference room was the same as before. 3 Varanthi at the curved table, Kale in the lower chair. But this time Administrator Veltha's nostril slits flared the moment Kale entered. You carry the scent of the expanse, Velth said. I was just there. Seems reasonable. No. Veltha's head tilted in that precise way. You carry something else. Something that should not interact with biological matter. Kale set the data core on the table. It clicked against the polished surface with a sound that was too loud in the quiet room. 1 data core, as requested. All human contracts get renewed. That was the deal. Coordinator Shin reached for the core with their 3-fingered hand, but Assessor Crane made a gesture that stopped them. Crane's eyes, larger than the other Varanthi's, with additional membrane layers, focused on Kale with an intensity that made his skin crawl. The human is contaminated, Crane said. Excuse me. You have been exposed to extra-dimensional frequencies. Your biology is resonating at wavelengths incompatible with station environmental parameters. Kale's jaw tightened. I feel fine. You feel nothing. That is the concern. Crane gestured, and a holographic display bloomed showing Kale's biosignature, or what should have been his biosignature. The pattern looked wrong. Fractured, like someone had taken his molecular structure and introduced static. What the hell did you send me into? Kale asked quietly. Veltha's hands moved in a pattern that might have been discomfort. The expanse was theorized to be a spatial anomaly. Our models indicated minimal risk of your models were wrong. Clearly. Velth paused. What did you encounter? Kale thought about lying again. Thought about keeping the eyes and the voice to himself. But the fractal pattern of his biosignature was still rotating in the hologram, and something about it made him feel like the truth was already leaking out of him whether he wanted it to or not. Something old, he said. Something that exists outside normal space. It spoke to me. All 3 Varanthi went absolutely still. That particular kind of stillness that meant every processing cycle in their brains had just redirected to threat assessment. Spoke, Velth repeated. In what language? All of them. None of them. It bypassed the translator and went straight into my head. What did it say? Kale met Veltha's eyes. Those cold, efficient, superior eyes that had looked at him like a tool 3 days ago. It asked what I was, Kale said. Said I wasn't prey or predator. Just asked what I was. And did you respond? I told it I fixed toilets. Coordinator Shin made a noise that the translator rendered as incredulity. You jested. With an extra-dimensional entity. Wasn't much of a jest. It's literally what I do. The entity's response? It said I was irrelevant and would be unmade. Then I ran. Veltha's hands moved through a complex pattern. The holographic display shifted, showing the Kethran expanse and the debris field where the harmonious inquiry had been. The ship was gone now. Not destroyed. Gone. Like it had been edited out of space. The renders, Velth said quietly. They are called the renders. This is the first confirmed biological contact with them in 17,000 cycles. Lucky me. You do not understand. Velth leaned forward, and for the first time Kale heard something in that translated voice that might have been fear. The renders do not speak. They do not acknowledge lesser dimensional beings. They simply unmake. The fact that it addressed you directly is unprecedented, Assessor Crane finished. And concerning. Why? Kale asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. Because the renders operate on principles of universal entropy optimization. They unmake that which is inefficient, redundant. They have been doing so since before the collective achieved spaceflight. Crane's membrane-covered eyes blinked slowly. In all recorded encounters, they have never paused to inquire about the nature of their targets. So what does it mean that they asked about me? It means, Velf said, that something about your species registered as anomalous to entities that exist to eliminate anomalies. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Great, Kale said. So I'm special. Can I go sleep now? No. Velf gestured, and 2 security drones materialized from wall ports Kale hadn't noticed. Sleek things, all angles, and threat. You will be quarantined in medical section until we determine the extent of your contamination. That wasn't part of the deal. The deal presumed you would return unaltered. You are now a potential vector for extra-dimensional corruption. Kale stood. The drones moved to flank him, their weapon ports not quite pointing at him, but not quite pointing away either. How long, he asked. Until we understand what has been done to you. Or until you expire. Whichever occurs first. Medical section was cleaner than Sector 7 and twice as cold. The quarantine room had white walls, white floor, white ceiling. Even the air tasted white, sterile, and empty. A medical scanner hummed in one corner, all Varanthe precision and indifference. They'd taken his clothes, given him a medical gown that was too short and too thin. His boots, his equipment belt, his personal effects, all confiscated for analysis. The data core, presumably, was being decoded somewhere by minds that thought in mathematics. Kale sat on the examination platform and waited. The door was transparent. He could see Varanthe medical staff moving past, their robes color-coded by specialty. Sometimes they glanced at him. Most times they didn't. He was a specimen now, a contaminated sample. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. The white room made time feel negotiable. Finally, the door opened. But it wasn't a Varanthe who entered. It was a Kaith. Kale had never seen one in person. The Kaith rarely left their computational sanctums, and when they did, it was usually to attend meetings so high-level that species like humans didn't even know they were happening. This one was smaller than he'd expected, about the size of a large dog, but made of something that looked like crystalline glass shot through with veins of light. It moved on 6 legs that made clicking sounds against the floor, and where its face should have been, there was just a geometric pattern that hurt to look at directly. Human Kale Reeves, it said, and the voice came from everywhere and nowhere, bypassing his ears entirely. I am Thought Curator Zen. I have analyzed the data core you retrieved. Kale's mouth was dry, and the information it contains is not data. What? It is a message, encoded across 17 dimensional frequencies, addressed to the collective. The Kaith moved closer. Its geometric face rotated through configurations that probably meant something in whatever language its species thought in. The renders are coming, Zen said. Not to the expanse. To everywhere. They have determined that the current iteration of the galaxy contains too many inefficiencies. They intend to optimize it. The words took a moment to process. When they did, Kale's stomach dropped. You mean they're going to unmake everything? Correct. All matter in this galactic arm will be reduced to its most efficient configuration, which, according to their calculations, is void. When the message does not specify, but the Harmonious Inquiry's encounter appears to have been a preliminary assessment. They were measuring response times, defensive capabilities, the efficiency of our current organizational structures. And we were found wanting. Kale laughed. It came out wrong. Too high, too sharp. So the galaxy's ending. And you're telling me this why? Zen's face rotated again. Because you are anomalous. The renders paused their assessment to address you specifically. This has never occurred. In 17,000 cycles of documented encounters, they have never acknowledged individual biological entities. Maybe they were just surprised a human made it that far. No. Zen moved closer still, until Kale could see the light flowing through its crystalline structure like luminous blood. They were confused. You represent a data point their optimization models cannot accommodate. You are inefficient by every measurable parameter. Fragile biology, limited cognitive processing, emotional instability. By their calculations, your species should have been outcompete and eliminated millennia ago. Yeah, well, we're stubborn. Precisely. Zen's geometric face stabilized into a pattern that might have been focus. Stubbornness is not a survival advantage. It is a rational persistence in the face of superior opposition. Yet your species thrives. This is the anomaly. So what do you want me to do about it? We want you to explain it. Kale stared at the cave. At this silicon-based being that thought in mathematical poetry and could probably calculate the optimal trajectory for every atom in his body. You're serious. The collective's most advanced computational resources cannot model human persistence. Our biological experts cannot explain your species' tendency to survive circumstances that should result in extinction. Even the renders, entities that exist to resolve inefficiencies, were confounded by you. I'm just one guy. Yes, which makes you a statistically significant sample. Zen paused. The Varanthi believe you should be isolated, studied, possibly euthanized if your contamination proves dangerous. I believe you should be deployed. Deployed where? To gather more data. You will return to the expanse. Every molecule in Kale's body screamed no. Absolutely not. You survived one encounter. This proves you possess some attribute the renders found. Interesting. We must understand this attribute if we are to develop countermeasures. Find someone else. There is no one else. You're the only biological entity to communicate with the renders and survive. You're the only data point we have. Kale stood. The medical gown was ridiculous, and he was barefoot, and he didn't care. I'm not going back there. Then, the galaxy will be optimized. 12 trillion sentient beings will be unmade, including the 17% of Apex Station's population that is human. The number hit like a physical blow. Kale thought of Jian, of the families in Sector 7, of his daughter, 5 years old, who sent him drawings on his birthday of spaceships that looked like crayon nightmares. That's not fair, he said quietly. No, Zen agreed, but it is efficient. The renders are very efficient. They gave him 12 hours to decide. Kale spent it in the quarantine room, staring at the white walls, and tried to logic his way out of a corner that had no exits. Every path led to the same place. Back to the expanse, back to the eyes, back to the voice that had asked, "What are you?" Around hour 8, Jian showed up outside the transparent door. The guards tried to stop her. She showed them something on her data pad, probably forged credentials, and somehow talked her way into the outer observation area. She pressed her hand against the transparent barrier. Kale walked over, put his hand on the other side. "You look terrible," she said. "Why, it's not my color. I heard what they're asking you to do. News travels fast." Kale. Her voice cracked. "You can't. I know. If you go back there, I know. Then don't. Tell them to find another solution. Tell them to, there is no other solution." Kale's hand slid down the barrier. "The renders are coming." Something about me made them pause. "That's all we've got. That's not enough. It's what there is." Jian's face crumpled. She was crying, and he couldn't reach her, couldn't do the stupid human thing of offering comfort through touch because there was a wall between them, and that wall might as well be everything. "I can't lose you," she said. "You might lose everyone if I don't try. That's not fair." "Yeah." Zen said the same thing. "The cave talked to you? Apparently, I'm a statistically significant sample." Jian laughed. It sounded like breaking glass. "You fix toilets." "I know. And now you're supposed to save the galaxy." "I know." She pressed her forehead against the barrier. Kale matched her, the transparent wall between them, the only thing keeping their skin from touching. "Promise me something," she said. "What?" "Promise you'll come back." Kale wanted to say the words that would make the look in her eyes go away. But he'd seen the eyes in the expanse. He'd heard the voice that treated reality like a suggestion. "I promise I'll try," he said. It wasn't enough. It was all he had. They gave him a ship this time. An actual ship, not a piece of junk held together by spite. Varanthi designed, human retrofitted, with engines that didn't sound like they had tuberculosis and life support that maintained actual pressure. The crew was human. All of them. Kale stood in the briefing room, and looked at the 7 people who'd volunteered to fly back into hell with him. 2 engineers, Rodriguez and Kim, both from Sector 7. A pilot named Voss, who had more combat hours than anyone in the human quarter. 3 scientists, Chun Okafor and Yuki, who specialize in spatial anomalies and xenobiology. And a medic named Saris, who looked about 12, but supposedly had kept people alive through radiation exposure that should have been lethal. "You all know the situation," Kale said. His voice came out steadier than he felt. "The renders are coming. We don't know when. We don't know why they paused when they encountered me. Our job is to go back to the expanse and figure out what makes humans anomalous enough to confuse entities that predate stars. And if we can't figure it out," Rodriguez asked. She was short, compact, built like someone who'd spent her life hauling equipment in low G. "Then we come back and tell the collective to start planning evacuation routes." "There are no evacuation routes," Chin said. He was tall, thin, nervous energy in human form. "If the renders are coming for the whole galactic arm, there's nowhere to run. Then we better figure out." Voss spoke up from the back. She was older, graying at the temples, with scars that said she'd survived things that should have killed her. "What's our extraction protocol if things go sideways?" "There isn't one." The room went quiet. "The collective isn't risking more ships," Kale continued. "We go in. We get answers. We come back. If we don't come back..." He paused. "Then at least we tried." "Hell of a pep talk," Okafor muttered. She was young, brilliant, the kind of mind that saw patterns in chaos. "Real inspiring." "I'm not here to inspire you. I'm here to tell you the truth. We're expendable. We've always been expendable. The only difference now is that our expendability might actually matter." Yuki raised her hand. She was quiet, methodical, the kind of scientist who solved problems by breaking them into component parts. "What do we tell our families?" Kale thought of his daughter. Of the last time he'd held her, her small arms around his neck. Her voice sank. "Come back soon, Daddy." "Tell them the truth," he said. "Tell them we're doing this so they don't have to." The ship launched at 0600 station time. Kale stood on the bridge and watched Apex Station shrink behind them. Its human sector a tiny patch of rust on gleaming metal. Jin was down there somewhere. His daughter was on Earth, 3 jump points away, drawing pictures of spaceships. The galaxy was full of people who didn't know it was ending. "Course laid in," Voss said from the pilot station. 6 days to the expanse at maximum burn. "Make it 5. That'll stress the engines. The engines can cope." Voss nodded and adjusted their trajectory. The ship surged forward, and Kale felt the acceleration press him back into the command chair that was too big for him. Chun approached from the science station. "I've been analyzing the data core's message. The dimensional encoding is... I don't even have words. It's like they're writing in frequencies that reality isn't supposed to support. Can you decode more of it? Maybe. If we had about 17,000 years and computational resources that don't exist." Chun paused. "But there's something else. The message contains what I think are coordinates. Locations in the expanse where the renders are, I don't know, gathering? Staging. They're planning something. Yeah, something big." Kale stared at the view screen. The stars stretched past them, distant and cold and indifferent. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Based on the energy signatures in the message? Best guess, 3 weeks. Maybe 4. And if we can't figure out what makes humans anomalous in that time..." Chin's face went pale. "Then we get a front row seat to the end of everything." The expanse looked different the second time. Or maybe Kale was different. Hard to tell when space itself decided to stop following rules. The stars bent wrong, twisting through angles that shouldn't exist, and the ship's sensors kept throwing errors as dimensional boundaries bled into each other like watercolors. "Radiation levels climbing," Rodriguez called from engineering. "Still within tolerance, but barely." "Life support holding," Kim added. She had her hands inside a maintenance panel, rerouting power around fluctuations that kept trying to kill the oxygen recyclers. "Though I wouldn't recommend staying long." Kale stood at the viewport and watched the debris field materialize. The harmonious inquiry was gone, erased, but the space where it had been still held an echo. a wrongness that made his teeth ache. There. Chen pointed at the main display. Those coordinates from the message. They're pointing to a region about 200,000 kilometers from our current position. What's there? According to sensors? Nothing. According to physics? Also nothing. According to the dimensional frequency analysis. Chen's hands moved through the holographic controls. Something that makes my brain hurt. Voss turned from the pilot station. We going in? Kale thought about the eyes. About the voice that had asked, what are you? About 12 trillion beings who didn't know they were standing on the edge of extinction. Yeah, he said. We're going in. The ship moved forward, engines humming, carrying 8 humans toward a place that shouldn't exist. The nothing resolved into something at about 100,000 kilometers. It started as a shimmer. Then, a distortion. Then, a structure that Kale's brain refused to process properly. Angles that connected to themselves, surfaces that were simultaneously inside and outside, geometry that made Escher look like a children's book illustrator. Holy moly, Okafor whispered. It was massive. The size of a moon, maybe, or a small planet. Those size felt like the wrong measurement for something that seemed to exist across multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. And it was growing, not in space, in reality. Expanding through frequencies that instruments could barely detect. It's a gate, Yuki said quietly. She'd been running analysis for the past hour, her face pressed close to her screens. Or a bridge. Or, I don't know, a thing that connects normal space to wherever the renders exist. And they're building it. Have been for millennia, probably, but the construction is accelerating. She pulled up a timeline analysis. At current rates, it'll be complete in 19 days. Then what? Then they come through. All of them. And they optimize everything. The word optimize had lost all its corporate blandness. Now it meant erasure. Void. The reduction of everything to its most efficient state, which was nothing. Chun was muttering to himself, hands flying through calculations. The energy requirements for this are obscene. They're pulling power from quantum vacuum fluctuations, harvesting zero-point energy across dimensional boundaries. The math doesn't even. How are they, Chun? Kale's voice cut through the spiral. Focus. How do we stop it? Stop it. Chun laughed high and sharp. Kale, this is technology that makes the collective look like we're banging rocks together. We can't stop it. Then how do we slow it down? I don't. Maybe if we. Chen's fingers moved. There are nodes, connection points where the dimensional frequencies intersect. If we could disrupt those, but we need to understand the fundamental architecture, and we don't have time to, Sarah spoke up from her medical station. What about the contamination? Everyone turned to look at her. Kale's contamination, she clarified. The extra-dimensional frequencies that got into his biology when he encountered the renders. We've been treating it like a problem. What if it's actually data? Data about what? Kale asked. About them. Their structure. Their dimensional signature. Saris pulled up his bioscan from the quarantine examination. The fractured pattern rotated in the hologram, still looking wrong. You interface with them directly. Part of them is still resonating in your cells. We might be able to use that to. The ship lurched. Every screen went white. Then black. Then displayed colors that didn't exist in normal electromagnetic spectrum. And the voice came back. Small things. You return. It carved itself into their neurons, bypassing ears and translators and conscious processing. Every human on the bridge grabbed their heads, and Kale felt blood trickle from his nose. The viewport filled with eyes. Not approaching. Just there. Looking at them across dimensional boundaries with interest that felt like being dissected at the molecular level. You persist. Why? Kale's mouth tasted copper. His vision swam. Beside him, Voss was on her knees, and Chun had gone white as paper. He forced himself upright. Forced words passed the pressure in his skull. Why do you care? The eyes blinked. Reality bent around the ship like air around a bullet. You are inefficient, fragile, limited processing capacity. Yet you survive conditions that eliminate superior configurations. This is anomalous. Yeah, well, Kale wiped blood from his nose. We're good at being anomalous. Explain. And suddenly Kale understood. They weren't destroying the galaxy out of malice. They were doing it because their entire existence was based on optimization, reducing everything to its most efficient form. They looked at the collective's vast civilizations, its carefully structured hierarchies, its tiers of advancement, and saw bloated inefficiency that needed correcting. But humans? Humans broke their models. We survive because we're too stupid to know we shouldn't, Kale said. The words came fast now, blood-slick and desperate. We're at the bottom of every hierarchy. We get the worst jobs, the worst quarters, the worst equipment. Every other species treats us like garbage, and we just keep going. We fix things with duct tape and spite. We eat protein paste and call it dinner. We work in radiation that would kill anyone else and joke about it after. This is not advantage. This is deficit. Yeah, that's the point. Kale stepped closer to the viewport, to the eyes that existed across dimensions. You're trying to optimize everything. Make it efficient. Perfect. But perfect systems are fragile. They can't adapt. They can't survive the unexpected. He thought of Jin, pulling him out of a failed airlock. Of Rodriguez, keeping engines running with scavenge parts. Of Voss, flying through combat zones in ships that should have fallen apart. Of every human in Sector 7 who woke up every day and chose to keep existing even though the galaxy had made it clear they were expendable. We're not efficient, Kale continued. We're redundant. Messy. We have emotions that don't serve survival. We waste resources on art and music and hope. By your calculations, we should have been eliminated. But we're still here. Because sometimes the messy, inefficient solution is the one that survives. The eyes considered this. The ship groaned under dimensional pressures it wasn't designed to handle. You propose that inefficiency is adaptive. I'm proposing that you can't optimize everything. Some problems don't have perfect solutions. They just have the solution that works. The galaxy is inefficient. It will be corrected. And then what? Kale's voice cracked. After you optimize everything in a void, what's left? Just you. Just perfect emptiness. Is that really better than messy, chaotic, inefficient life? The silence stretched. Then, you speak in paradox. I speak human. Kale was shaking now, but he kept his eyes on those vast, terrible eyes. We're walking paradoxes. We shouldn't work, but we do. And maybe that's worth preserving. Maybe the galaxy needs its inefficient species. Its tier 9s who fix toilets and survive radiation and keep going when every logical calculation says they should quit. This is unprecedented input. The pressure eased, just slightly. The colors bleeding through the viewport became less hostile. We will consider. And then they were gone. Not gone from existence. Just gone from here. The eyes withdrew, and the ship's systems rebooted with a cascade of cheerful beeps that felt obscene after what had just happened. Kale fell into the command chair. His whole body was shaking. Did that just happen? Rodriguez asked, voice small. I think, Chun said slowly, we just gave extra-dimensional entities an existential crisis. Yuki pulled up her sensor readings. The gate. The construction. It's paused. Paused. Not stopped. But the acceleration has halted. They're not building anymore. Saris was at Kale's side with a medkit. She pressed a bandage to his nose, checked his pupils. You're a mess. I'm alive. Yeah, I'm not sure how. Voss levered herself upright, using the pilot station for support. What now? Kale wiped blood from his chin, looked at the 7 other humans who'd flown into the void with him, who'd stood against entities that could unmake reality and hadn't run. Now we go home, he said, and we tell the collective that humans just bought them time. How much time? Okafor asked. I don't know, but enough. The journey back was quiet. They monitored the gate constantly, watching for signs it would resume construction. It didn't. The dimensional frequencies stayed stable. The renders had withdrawn to whatever space they called home, and for the first time in recorded history, they'd stopped. Because of humans. Because of 8 people in a ship held together with retrofitted parts and desperation. Chin spent the trip analyzing everything they'd recorded. The bioresonance between Kale and the renders. The dimensional signatures. The pause in construction. I think I understand, he said on day 4. They were gathered in the galley, barely more than a closet with a food processor and magnetic tables, eating protein paste that tasted like institutional sadness. Understand what? Kale asked. Why they paused. Why you matter. Chun pulled up a hologram from his personal datapad. Every other species they've encountered operates on efficiency models. The Kaith optimized for computational speed. The Varanthi for administrative precision. Even the primitive species they've eliminated were trying to achieve some form of efficiency, better hunting, better gathering, better survival. And humans don't. We're optimized for nothing. We're generalists. We waste energy on things that don't increase survival. We make art. We tell stories. We help each other even when it decreases our personal fitness. Chen's voice got quieter. To the renders, that's not just inefficient. It's impossible. Their entire existence is based on the idea that everything trends toward optimization. But we're proof that sometimes systems trend towards something else. What else? Yuki asked. I don't know. Resilience? Adaptability? Hope. Chun laughed. The math doesn't have words for it. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. Then, so we broke their worldview. Yeah, pretty much. Good, Voss said. She was working on her 3rd serving of protein paste, which said something about either her constitution or her standards. They've been unmaking civilizations for 17,000 cycles. About time someone made them think. Apex Station appeared on their scopes 5 days later. The collective had been busy. The approach vectors were full of warships, Varanthi cruisers, Kaith computational nodes, even a few species Kale didn't recognize. A defensive perimeter that probably couldn't stop the renders, but at least showed they were trying. They think we failed, Kim observed. Can't blame them, Kale said. We did fly into certain death. Voss opened a comm channel. Apex Station, this is the human vessel Persistence requesting docking clearance. Static. Then, Administrator Veltha's voice, pitched with something that might have been surprise. Persistence, you are intact. Mostly, Voss said, requesting immediate docking and debriefing. We have information regarding the render threat. Clearance granted. Dock 7. The channel closed. Dock 7, Rodriguez said. Not the civilian platform. No, Kale agreed. Not anymore. The debriefing room was different this time. It was bigger. And it wasn't just 3 Varanthi sitting at a curved table. The room held representatives from every tier of the collective. Kaith in their crystalline bodies, Varanthi in administrative colors. Species Kale didn't recognize with biology that ranged from crystalline to gaseous to things that might have been pure energy in containment fields. And every single one of them was looking at the 8 humans standing in the center of the room. Thought curator Zen spoke first. You encountered the renders. Yes, Kale said. And you survived. Obviously. Explain. So Kale did. He told them about the gate, about the eyes, and the voice, and the question that had been asked twice now. About his answer. Messy, inefficient, wholly human. About the pause in construction. When he finished, the room was silent. Then, one of the Kaith, not Zen, someone else whose geometric face was more complex, spoke. You reason with them. I talked to them. Not sure if that counts as reasoning. You convinced entities that exist to eliminate inefficiency, that inefficiency has value. I convinced them it was worth thinking about. This is unprecedented. Yeah, people keep saying that. Administrator Veltha's nostril slits flared. The gate construction has paused. Our long-range sensors confirm this. But for how long? I don't know, Kale said honestly. Could be days. Could be cycles. They're considering. That's all I know. And if they decide against your argument, then we're back where we started. Except now we've bought time to prepare. Time. The word came from something that looked like a cloud of luminescent gas. The collective has never successfully defended against the renders. In 17,000 cycles, every encounter has resulted in total elimination of the target zone. Yeah, well, Kale met those strange, gaseous eyes. You've never had humans before. The cloud pulsed. You believe your species can defeat them? I believe we can piss them off and survive it, which is more than anyone else has managed. This is not a strategy. It's the only one we've got. Zen's crystalline structure chimed softly. The human is correct. We have exhausted computational models. We have exhausted technological approaches. The renders exist on a level we cannot meaningfully interact with. A pause. Except, apparently, through biological paradox. You're saying humans are your weapon? Okafor asked. I am saying humans are our only data point. You survived first contact. You survived second contact. You introduced doubt into entities that have operated without doubt since before civilizations existed. Zen's geometric face rotated. This is not precedent. This is not logical. This is, by all measures, impossible. Impossible is kind of our specialty, Rodriguez muttered. Veltha's hands moved through complex patterns. The council will deliberate on this information. You will remain on station pending further assignment. Assignment? Kale asked. If the gate construction resumes, we will need you to return to the Expanse. You want us to talk to them again. We want you to survive them again. Everything else is secondary. They were dismissed. But, unlike last time, they weren't confined to quarantine. Instead, they were given quarters in Section 5, not quite the administrative levels, but far above the Rust Belt. Actualvis. Private sanitation. Food that didn't come exclusively in paste form. Kale stood in his assigned room and felt like an imposter. Someone knocked. Jin was at the door. She looked at him, at his clean jumpsuit and bandaged nose and the medical bracelet that tracked his dimensional contamination. Then, she punched him in the shoulder. Ow! You came back. I promised I'd try. You talked to extra-dimensional entities. Twice. Yeah. And convinced them to pause galaxy-wide genocide. For now, she punched him again. Then, she grabbed him and held on like he might dissolve if she let go. You're an idiot, she said into his shoulder. I know. And you're probably gonna have to go back there. I know. And I'm gonna hate every second you're gone. I know. It stood like that for a while. Just two humans in a room, holding each other because that's what humans did. Inefficient. Emotionally messy. Wholly irrational. Perfect. 3 days later, the collective council summoned Kale again. This time, the room was different. Smaller. More intimate. Just Zen and Velth with that particular quality of stillness that meant decisions have been made. The council has reached consensus, Zen said. Kale waited. Humanity will be reclassified to Tier 5, effective immediately. You will be granted full citizenship rights, including representation in council proceedings, access to advanced technology, and removal of all labor restrictions. The words took a moment to process. Tier 5. That was 3 tiers below the Caith. That was the level where species got to make decisions instead of just following them. In exchange, Velth continued, humanity will serve as primary contact specialists for all future render interactions. You will train additional teams. You will develop protocols. And if the gate resumes construction, we go back, Kale finished. Yes. What if we say no? Zen's crystalline structure chimed. Then, you remain Tier 9. And when the renders come, you face them as you always have, alone, expendable, and without resources. That's not much of a choice. No, Velth agreed. But it is more choice than you had before. Kale thought about Sector 7, about the families living in rust and radiation, fixing things with scavenge parts, eating paste, and calling it dinner. About his daughter, drawing pictures of spaceships on Earth. What about the other humans? He asked. The ones still doing waste reclamation and environmental maintenance. The ones living in the Rust Belt. All human labor contracts will be renegotiated, Velth said. Your species will have access to the same advancement opportunities as any Tier 5 civilization. And if individual humans choose to stay in waste reclamation, that is their choice to make. Kale smiled. It felt strange on his face after everything. Then we accept, on one condition. Zen's geometric face rotated. You are not in a position to dictate terms. Sure I am. You need us. We're the only ones who can talk to the things trying to unmake reality. Kale crossed his arms. So here's the condition. Humanity doesn't just become your specialized tool. We get full integration, education, technology transfer. Not just for the ones you need, but for everyone. That is already included in Tier 5 classification. Then, make it explicit in writing. Because we've spent 300 cycles being treated like vermin, and I want it documented that those days are over. Veltha's nostril slits flared. You dare. Yes, Kale interrupted. Idare. Because you need us. Because we're the walking paradox that broke the render's worldview. Because we're inefficient and messy, and we survive things we shouldn't. He leaned forward. So if you want access to that, you give us everything. The silence stretched. Then Zen chimed softly, a sound that might have been laughter. Acceptable, the Kaith said. Your terms will be formalized in the agreement. Good. You are insufferable. Yeah, that's also in our nature. The formal announcement came at 1,400 station time. Every screen in Apex Station displayed the same message, translated into every language spoken by every species in residence. Humanity reclassified to Tier 5. Full citizenship rights granted. All existing labor contracts nullified. Renegotiation commences immediately. In Sector 7, someone started screaming. Then someone else. Then everyone. Kale watched from Section 5 as the Rust Belt erupted in celebration. People poured into the corridors, hugging and crying and laughing. Someone started a chant in broken standard that roughly translated to "We matter now." Jian found him by the observation port. You did this, she said. We did this. All of us. No. She turned him to face her. You flew into the void. Twice. You looked at things that unmake reality and asked them why. You made them think. I got lucky. You were brave. I was terrified. Same thing sometimes. Down in Sector 7, the celebration was still going. Rodriguez and Kim are being lifted on his shoulders. Chen was crying. Voss was trying to pretend she wasn't crying and failing. They're going to make us heroes, Kale said quietly. You are heroes. We're just people who didn't quit when we should have. Jian smiled. Yeah, that's what makes you heroes. That night, Kale sent a message to Earth, to his daughter, who probably wouldn't understand all the words but would understand that Daddy was coming home soon. That things were different now. That maybe, just maybe, the drawing she made of spaceships would become something more than crayon dreams. He told her about the renders, about the eyes and the voice and the question. Were you? And he told her his answer. We're human. We're messy and inefficient, and we survive things we shouldn't. We fix things with duct tape and hope. We eat terrible food and call it dinner. We work jobs that should kill us and joke about it after. We're at the bottom of every hierarchy, and we still keep going. We're not perfect. We're not optimized. We're not the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. But we're still here, and that counts for something. The gate stayed paused for 17 days. Then, on the 18th day, something changed. The collective's long-range sensors detected movement in the expanse. Not construction. Something else. The dimensional frequencies were shifting, but in patterns nobody had seen before. Zen summoned Kale immediately. The renders are responding, the Kaith said. To what? To you. To humanity. To the concept of valuable inefficiency. Zen's crystalline structure pulsed with light. They are adapting. Is that good or bad? Unknown. But they have sent a message. Addressed specifically to you. What does it say? Zen pulled up a holographic display. The message was encoded in the same dimensional frequencies as before, but this time the translation was clearer. More direct. Inquiry accepted. Inefficiency models require expansion. Survival protocols being revised. Humanity designated. Anomalous, but significant. Optimization postponed pending further data. Gota construction ascended. Question. What else are you? Kale stared at the message. At the question that was no longer hostile. At the word significant and suspended and what else? They're asking for more, he said. Yes. They want to understand us. Yes, that's not what I expected. Entities that exist to optimize do not typically ask questions. But you taught them that optimization is incomplete without understanding inefficiency. Zen's geometric face stabilized. They wish to study humanity, to learn what makes you persist. And if we refuse, then they will resume construction based on incomplete data. And the galaxy will be optimized. So we don't really have a choice. You have the choice to participate willingly or unwillingly. That is more choice than most species receive from the renders. Kale thought about it, about opening humanity to the scrutiny of beings that existed across dimensions, about becoming the galaxy's example of productive inefficiency, about his daughter, who would grow up in a universe where humans weren't vermin anymore. Okay, he said, tell them we accept. You speak for your entire species. No, but I speak for the ones who flew into the void and survived. And I think we've earned the right to answer questions about what we are. Zen chimed softly. The message will be sent. The response came 3 hours later. Not a message, a presence. The renders didn't come to Apex Station. They were too vast for that, too spread across dimensional frequencies. But they sent something, an avatar maybe, or a probe, or just a portion of their consciousness compressed into a form that could interact with normal space. It manifested in the observation deck as geometry that hurt to look at, angles that connected to themselves, surfaces that were simultaneously reflective and transparent. And at the center, something that might have been an eye, or might have been a camera, or might have been something that didn't have a word in any language. Every species on the station felt it. The Varanthi retreated to their administrative levels. The Kaith withdrew into computational silence. Even the gaseous species compressed themselves into tighter containment fields. Only the humans stayed. Kale stood at the front of the observation deck. Behind him, Rodriguez, Kim, Chun, Okafor, Yuki Voss, Saris, and Jian, who'd refused to leave even when he'd asked her to. The avatar's not eye focused on them. Show us, it said, what you are, why you persist, what makes inefficiency valuable. Kale looked at the others, at Rodriguez with her scarred hands, at Chun with his anxious energy, at Voss with her combat scars, at Jian with her defiant stance. Okay, he said, but it's going to take a while. Time is irrelevant. Yeah, you keep saying that. Kale smiled. But for us, time is everything. It's all we've got. And then he started talking. He told them about Sector 7, about fixing things with scavenge parts, and living in radiation, and eating protein paste, about Jian pulling him from a failed airlock, about his daughter's drawings, about 300 cycles of being told they were worthless and choosing to matter anyway. He told them about human history, about species that should have been outcompete but weren't, about civilizations that collapsed and rebuilt and collapsed again and kept going, about art and music and stories that served no survival purpose but existed anyway. He told them about love, about sacrifice, about hope, about all the inefficient, messy, wholly irrational things that made humanity human. The others added their voices. Rodriguez talked about keeping engines running through impossible conditions. Chen explained how curiosity drove humans to ask questions even when the answers were dangerous. Okafor described the human need to help each other, even when it decreased individual fitness. Jian talked about friendship, about choosing to care for people who couldn't offer anything in return. The avatar listened. For hours it listened, and when they finally stopped talking, voices hoarse, emotionally exhausted, the not-eye pulsed with colors that didn't exist in normal spectrum. Understood, it said. Partial. You cannot be fully comprehended. Your nature resists complete optimization. This is acceptable. The avatar began to dissolve. Not violently, just fading like mist in sunlight. Gate will remain suspended. Humanity will be studied. Not as subjects, as teachers. Teachers, Kale asked. You will show us what we do not know. how to exist without perfection, how to value that which serves no efficient purpose. The avatar was almost gone now, just a shimmer in the air. "Thank you," it said, and then it was gone. The silence in the observation deck lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then, Rodriguez started laughing. Chin joined her. Okafor was crying. Voss just sat down heavily, like her legs had stopped working. Jin grabbed Kale and kissed him. "We did it," she said. "We did something. We saved the galaxy. We taught extra-dimensional entities about inefficiency." Same thing. Kale looked out the viewport at Apex Station, at the ships docked, and the stars beyond. At the galaxy that had called them vermin and was now calling them teachers. "Yeah," he said. "I guess it is." 6 months later, the Human Cultural Center opened in what used to be Sector 7. They kept the rust, kept the scavenged parts and the improvised patches. But they'd added teaching spaces, libraries, art galleries, places where humans could show the galaxy what inefficiency looked like when you stopped treating it as a deficit. Kale stood in the main hall and watched Ferranti's students examine human paintings. Watch cave computational nodes try to understand poetry. Watch species from across the collective learn that sometimes the messy solution was the right one. His daughter was there. She'd come from Earth with his ex-wife, and she was showing a group of Ferranti children how to draw spaceships. They were terrible at it. Their 3-fingered hands weren't built for crayons, but they were trying. That counted for something. "They want you back," Jin said. She'd come up beside him quietly, the way she always did. "Ooh, the renders." Another message came through. "They have more questions. They always have more questions." "Yeah, well, you started this." Kale smiled. "We started this." "Fair." They stood together, watching humans and aliens learn from each other. Watching inefficiency become valuable. Watching the galaxy realize that maybe, just maybe, the species at the bottom of the hierarchy had something to teach. "You going?" Jin asked. "To talk to extra-dimensional entities about why humans make art." "Yeah, probably." "Want company?" Kale looked at her. At this woman who'd pulled him from airlocks and believed in him when he'd stopped believing in himself. "Always," he said. The renders never came through the gate. They kept it suspended, kept studying humanity, kept asking, "What else are you?" And humans kept answering. In art, in music, in stories, in all the inefficient, messy, wholly irrational ways that made them human. The galaxy learned not to be human. That was impossible. But to value the things that couldn't be optimized, to see strength in vulnerability, to understand that sometimes the species at the bottom of the hierarchy survived because they were too stubborn to die and too hopeful to quit. Humanity never made it to Tier 1. They didn't need to. They'd already proven they were something better than perfect. They were persistent. They were human. And that was enough.